Thank y'all for being here. I feel like this is home court advantage for me. This is the room I teach Bible class in. This is a class that I'm very familiar with, although the faces are different. So involvement is so important. I'm going to give you in 5 seconds what you need to do. And then I'll turn you loose. You've got to get more people involved. They got to do more. The reason that this is a problem is because generally we have a small group of people doing the majority of the work. Isn't that right? Right. And the reason for that is, well, there's several reasons for that. We're going to talk about those today, how to address those, what we need to do. But what happens a lot of time is we have good workers in the church and they get tired. And they get burned out. And you begin to find that programs that were running really well for a while begin to dwindle. And in our society, what's the most valuable thing that a person has? It's not their home. It's not their car. It is time. And if you ask somebody to do something, they're always going to weigh, is it worth my time? I think there's a way that we go about helping with that. And it starts at the top. It doesn't start with the members. It starts with organization leading to correct function. What do I mean by that? Well, we have elders, we have deacons, and then we have members. And honestly, what do the elders do? A lot of times they do everything, don't they? What do the deacons do? And so by the time it gets to the members don't know what they're supposed to be doing or how to get involved. And so there's a lot of confusion. So we're going to go through the appropriate way that these functions should work, because I think it leads to the work filtering down to where it needs to be done. And we're in the midst of doing some things to challenge all levels of this, and I'll share some of those with you as we go through. But first of all, the shepherd. Well, what should the shepherd be? He is a steward. He is a bishop. And I want to talk, first of all, about the shepherd as he should be. As he should be. Not as he is in many places. I think there are some congregations where I think the eldership has the right view of their work. But God tells us that they should be shepherding, doesn't he? What does that mean? Well, the shepherd is going to be someone who knows the flock. And the flock knows the shepherd. This idea of shepherding is a metaphor that is used more than 500 times in the Old and New Testament. I think God's trying to tell us something with that. You're either supposed to understand what you're supposed to be as sheep, or you're supposed to understand what you're supposed to be as a shepherd. But there's a relationship between the two of them. And I think when the shepherd knows the flock, and the flock knows the shepherd, what happens? They follow, don't they? They don't recognize a strange voice. Sheep don't want to follow a guest shepherd, right? They want to follow the shepherd who has taken care of them, who has been there for them, who has walked with them in difficult times. And so as a shepherd, I think there's nothing more important that you do than to spend time with the sheep. Because then they get to know your voice. And they will follow a voice that they recognize. The shepherd spends a lot of time in the pasture with his sheep. You know, relationships, I think, require availability. I'm amazed when I look at Jesus and you see the picture of him in Mark chapter 1, Mark chapter 2. And he's trying to go out early in the morning to spend a little time praying with God. And what happens? His disciples come and find him. We were looking for you. And from morning until evening, late in the evening, what is he doing? He's spending time with people. Whether it's large crowds, whether it's individuals, whether it's the 12 apostles, he is using his time to build a relationship with them. Because why? He's going to turn his work over to them very soon, isn't he? He wants them to be prepared. In order for them to understand what he's asking them to do, he has to model that, doesn't he? Now, I think there are a few ways that we sometimes shepherd as elders that probably not the way God has instructed for us. One is sometimes as a cowboy. A cowboy does what? He drives the herd. Yeah, right? Rawhide. Get after the cattle and get them going the right direction. Well, that doesn't always work so well with real people who can make choices. Cows, they don't really make a lot of choices, right? But if you act as a cowboy, there's not the relationship there. I think as an elder, we've got to understand that we need to be leaders. But if no one's willing to follow you, then you're not much of a leader, are you? And so that's the reason I think the cowboy approach doesn't work. You're not driving the herd out in front. You're leading the herd where it needs to go. That's why I think the metaphor of a shepherd is used in Scripture so much. The second model that we sometimes look at is the CEO model. What does that mean? How does a CEO run a company? Because of my title, I get to tell you how this is going to work, don't I? And whether you agree with it or not, because of my title, you better listen. They probably have earned their position. But it's not what God describes for his shepherds, for the elders. Sometimes as a CEO, they work behind closed doors, right? Not everything is open for them to see. They make decisions. They dispatch orders. They announce policies. And the people go, why are we doing that? If you've ever worked in a business and you get things from higher up and you go, why are we doing that? I don't understand that. That seems like the worst idea possible because where I'm at, that's not going to work. That's not going to change who I am. That's not going to get me excited about working for this company. So a CEO model, once again, is not appropriate. I think sometimes we let culture swallow up the designs of God. Well, we have to operate this way. This is the way people are used to operating. They're used to a CEO. No. Not in the church they shouldn't be. The church is to be different than the world. It's not to accept what the world says and how the world says things should operate. It is there to be different, to show that God does not operate the way men operate. And so if we begin to accept this CEO model, then we're kind of going the way of the world. We're letting the world dictate how things should work. And if you don't like the way somebody's doing something, what do? You fire them. You find somebody else. You replace them. You're not patient with them. You don't try and help them see why it's important what they're doing. That's a rarity in a CEO, isn't it? And so I think elders shouldn't be CEOs. Lynn Anderson wrote in his book, he says, a leader who develops people adds. A leader who develops leaders multiplies. Sometimes we have too small of a vision of how to affect the church. We need to be developing leaders so we can multiply the work. Doug mentioned the work that I do with evangelism and what I continually try to do with that, because I know there are limits to what I can do. I know that. I see that. I only have so many hours in my day. I haven't figured out how to do a 30-hour day or an 8-day week yet. If anybody's figured that out, I'd like to talk to you about how you work that out. But I'm not getting any more hours or any more days in my week, so I need to multiply what I'm doing. If we're going to reach more people, I've got to multiply it. Elders, that means sharing the work. Sharing the work. And some of the ways that we do that are very important. An elder must be willing to delegate their current non-shepherding task to others. Those others are specifically named deacons. Okay, what would a non-shepherding task be? Taking care of the building? Overseeing a program? Maybe even doing things that we typically call ministry duties, right? Because we are all ministers. When we become a Christian, we become a minister before God, a priest, a royal priesthood, don't we? Is it okay for regular members to be doing some things in that category? Sure, as long as you have that sort of vision. And so, elders need to be sharing what they do. If they don't, the whole process of getting members involved in the work will fail because the work's not going to be passed on. How many of y'all have seen where the eldership tends to do most, if not the majority, of the work? They're involved in the evangelism. They're involved in the visitation. They're involved in inviting people in their homes. They're involved in everything, and not many others are doing much in those areas. It's because the work is not being shared. It's not being passed on. Part of that may be a trust issue. It's not going to be done the right way. What do we typically mean when we say that? It's not going to be done the right way. It's not going to be done how I want it done. Are there more than one way to do things? Yes, there is. There are more than one way to do most things. The only things that I say that there's one way are things that are in Scripture. If it's not dictated in Scripture, we baptize in one way, don't we? Why? Because the Scriptures have dictated that. But how we do visitation, that's open for a little discussion, isn't it? How we meet together as smaller groups, that's open for a little more discussion, isn't it? There are a variety of ways to do some things. And so we've got to be willing to trust some others with ideas that may be different than how we would see it done. If we don't, the work doesn't get passed on to the next level. The attitude will prevail that if we're going to have it done right, then one of the elders must do it or must be assigned to oversee it. Well, what's the difference between that and somebody who is nitpicking everything that you do? What happens to people like that? They eventually say, I'm quitting. I'm not going to do it. If I can't do anything right, then you just take it back. You do it again. So a few things that are important. The truth is that elders are overseers of souls, not necessarily the task of the church. This area falls, I think, to the deacons. So let's talk about deacons. Let's talk about the deacons. What are they? They're the servants, aren't they? Diakonos means servant. It's not a title, but it is merely a function, simply meaning servant. It means what? Whatever the elders see them helping with, they'll do, because they are a servant. Thomas Holland said this. He said, the elders are often doing the works of deacons, and the deacons just simply don't know what to do. Do you agree with that? The elders are doing the work of deacons, and the deacons don't know what to do. What are we supposed to do? I thought this was our area of work. But if I want to do anything, I have to come to the elders to get approval to do it. I have to get approval for a budget. I have to get approval to announce it. I have to get approval to try and make a go of it in a certain way. So, guess what? I'll just give it back to them. But the deacons need to be given the ability to do a work. Remember what happened with Moses when he was trying to hear the people, and it was day after day, all day. And his father-in-law, Jethro, comes to him and says, what? What you're doing is not good. You need to be doing the things that God wants you to do. Divide out that work. Give it to someone else to do. And if there are cases that they can't decide, then they can bring it to you. But you need to be doing what God has called you to do. And this is not it. And so it went a lot better for Moses once he did that. We need to trust our deacons. Look, if we don't feel like they're the sort of characteristic that needs to serve as a deacon, then don't appoint them. Right? But if they are, then let's give them a task. Let's give them some things that they're qualified to do and let them do it. Give them the ability to serve. I tell you what, when you look at those first 7 men who were appointed, they were pretty impressive, weren't they? You've got Philip, who is an evangelist, who's down teaching. You've got Stephen, who's preaching even while being stoned. And these are guys who are what? Serving the widows, the Grecian widows. But that wasn't their only ability. They were men filled with the Spirit, weren't they? And so God had given them abilities that the church could benefit from. And they used them. I think sometimes we have a very narrowly defined idea of what a deacon is. He can work on the flower beds, but let's not let him do anything with people. You may have some people that are really good with that. That may be their ability, but I think we can challenge our deacons to be more. We're in the process of trying to do that more and more. That means sometimes what you've got to do is you've got to get guys who are better at being a servant. Better at being a servant. Well, the work of deacons, elders are often doing, and the deacons don't have any meaningful work left. So a couple things. Deacons are going to have this role of leadership, must do a few things. Number one, they must delegate meaningful tasks to others. See, this is really where involvement begins to have the rubber meet the road. If your deacons don't know what they're supposed to do, how are they going to give any meaningful work to the congregation? How are they going to get people to help them with a work that they don't even get to do? And so guess what? The majority of the congregation is sitting out there. They're coming Sunday morning. They're taking up a pew. They're going home. And they're not thinking about ministry the rest of the week because they don't have anything to do. And so we need to help our deacons understand that delegating meaningful tasks are very important. One of the things that is very important here are meaningful tasks. When people's time is so valuable, if they don't see how it connects to the benefit of the church or to the benefit of the congregation or the benefit of reaching out and evangelizing, they're not going to be interested. Do you blame them? If it's just busy work, if it's just work that doesn't really help build the body up in any way, doesn't really directly serve God, you may say, well, that's all we get. That's all our people want, or things like that. I don't think so. I think people today want to feel like the things that they are involved in are meaningful. Because if it's not meaningful, my time's too valuable to be involved in that. That's the simple truth. You're going to lose out every time. If you look at this seminar that we're holding right now, we typically have about 150 volunteers every year to help with different facets of this. I'm at the point now where I don't have to solicit a lot of help. People are coming saying, hey, can I help with this again? Why? Because they see a crowd of almost 1,000 people here. They hear all the positive that comes from it. They hear people talking about how much they appreciate it. And they feel like my service is doing a good work for the church. If you don't have something like this, consider doing something that feeds not only your congregation with involvement, but it feeds your area for the church. This is a lot of work. Every year, Tim, the preacher here, and I get together and say, is it really worth it? Because it takes several months of our time every year. But then you look at how much the people here love it, how much the volunteers are excited about it, and you say this is good for the congregation as well as the church, for all those who get to come and participate in it. And it is important to have things that are meaningful like this so that you have things that people can be involved in. If all you have are things that 2 or 3 can help with here, or 2 or 3 can help with there, if you got very many people, you're not getting a large bit of involvement from that. And you're not going to, because there's not enough meaningful work to go around. One of the processes that we go through every 2 years as we reappoint deacons, we look at men, we look at new men that have come to the congregation who we think would be a big help in our deacon work, give some guys a chance maybe to move out of that work if they feel like they want to or need to because of recent circumstances. But one of the things that we do every year is we go through and we mark off things. We say that work, not really needed anymore. It's not allowing people to get involved. And we add new works that we think will represent the congregation and where we need to be going. Not where we are necessarily, but where we need to be going. And we begin to say, who would be good to be involved in that? To lead that, to encourage the congregation to understand its importance and its priority in the work that we do. And it's helpful. It is helpful for continuing to keep the church alive. Sometimes we have works that we're not even sure why we have them anymore. They've always been there. It seems like they're a good work, but what's the purpose now? What function is it serving? Maybe it needs to be redone. Maybe it needs to be killed. Maybe something else, another version of it, needs to be thought about with the way that people are. I'll give you one example of how we've done that recently, and then we'll move on to the members and their role. We do visitation. We used to do it on Monday night, kind of like a Monday night for the master, where we encourage people to go out and visit. We encourage people to come and fill out cards. It was dwindling, and I'll tell you exactly why, because of what we've talked about already. Asking people for another night in their week is a big commitment. And so I said, well, you know what? It's not wrong to do this on a night where we're already meeting, rather than requiring them to come back. So we moved it to Sunday evening. We set up, we give out the visits, the card writing people. They all pick it up Sunday night as they walk out that main corridor in the building. And guess what? Involvement has grown about 3 times. We were going like this. Now we're going back up again. I think that sort of creative thinking helps the congregation to figure a way that they can do things that they long to do. But it does it in a way where we're not saying, well, if you don't come up another night to the church building, then you're not a good Christian. Yeah, a lot of people want to do the work, but you got to find a way to help them fit it in their schedule. And then throughout the week, they go and they do it whenever, and they bring them back to me by the next Sunday. Works beautifully, but it takes some creative thinking. And so we need to help our deacons delegate meaningful tasks to people in order to get them involved. If they won't share the work because the work hasn't been shared with them, then guess where the bottleneck is? It's at the top. If you get that one open, then you got to make sure with your deacons that you're also unlocking any bottlenecks they have getting the work to the membership. Have gifts and passions that are suited to their tasks. Deacons need to be allowed to work in areas that they care about as much as possible. I don't know if that's a revolutionary idea. Sometimes we say, well, you're going to be a servant. I'm going to put you here. And the guy's like, I don't even like this area. I don't know. If I put one of our elders, say Charles Williams, who's also a staff member, I said, Charles, why don't you head up our technology for us? He'd go, are you nuts? I don't know anything about that. That's better suited to other people. Yet sometimes we do that, right? I can't find anybody else to put there, so I'm going to put this guy. Well, you might as well just kill that work. Because if he doesn't care about it, it's not going to happen. Put people where their gifts and their passions are suited, and you'll find they'll take that work and they'll make it theirs. They'll take ownership of it. And it will produce good fruit for the kingdom and for your congregation when you do that. If you say, well, we have some areas that we need servants in and nobody really wants them, you may have to do some of that. Okay, I'm not saying you can completely get rid of that. But we ask our deacons, what are a couple areas you'd like to work in? And we also ask them, what's the one area that you don't want to work in? And that's good communication between the leadership and between those servants, so that they feel like there's some sort of dialogue going on. They're being heard and listened to, not just dictated to, like we talked about with the CEO style. Number 3, equip the people with skills and resources to be able to accomplish their ministry task. How do you do that? How do you equip people with skills and resources? Well, number 1, you got to talk to them about what it is they're trying to do. We have job descriptions for all our deacons, but that's not where it ends. Okay, we want them to have a basic idea of what it is that we're asking them to do. But we also sit down and talk with them. What is this work about? How does it fit the larger whole of what we're trying to accomplish here at North MacArthur? What is your role in that? That's part of giving them the work. And so you try to equip them. You say, what is it you're going to need? Let me give you an example. We had a guy who came and said, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'd really like to try and start a recovery group to serve not only our congregation, but some of those in this community. And so we said, what do you need to make that go? What do you think you need? And so I went with him to a couple of meetings to talk about it with some other people who were doing it. I began to kind of say, how does that fit into North MacArthur's ministry, our evangelism, our reaching out? But he had the passion. We helped him to figure out how it fits in the scope of how we minister and what we do. And now he runs it, and I check on him occasionally and say, how's everything going? What else do you need? What could make it better? what's going really well. Now we have a whole part of this congregation, about 12 individuals who are helping with that program, who used to feel like they were outsiders because I'm unique. I have special problems. I don't necessarily fit in as well. But now they're integrated in the ministry. They feel like they are now helping others come into the kingdom. And they have a meaningful ministry that they used to feel because of their background they were excluded. But now they're part of the ministry team. They're doing ministry with others and sharing what they have learned from their experiences with people that are hurting, that are going through some of the same difficulties they do. And they're better suited for it than I am. Because I can understand from the outside perspective, but we've tried to equip people with skills for that. And it took our eldership being willing to say, we trust you. And it took some deacons being willing to say, I want to do this work. I'm passionate about it. And it took our ministry team saying, let's equip you. We'll help you figure out the right way to do it. And we'll go from there. So I think these three things are really important. Deacons should be men who live Christ-centered lives because they are an example to the congregation where they serve of what genuine service is all about. I think, number one, that means that they're humble. Humility does a lot to build bonds with other people, doesn't it? I don't like arrogance. I don't care to be around people, but people that are very humble, I could spend all my time with them because you always feel like they're looking for your best interest, right? And that's attractive to people. And so I think you have to understand that they need to be men who are examples of genuine service. They need to be men who are among the people, involved in their lives, knowing their needs and their problems. And third, deacons need to serve as intermediaries between the elders and the members of the congregation. We have about 43 deacons, and I think that number is going to go up this year as we reappoint them. Do we have that much work? Yes. Because I think as God gives us more people, then that means what? We should be doing more, right? And that means we've got a larger group to motivate to serve. And so I think if they serve as intermediaries between the elders and the congregation, you've got things flowing from the top down into the congregation. Communication, interaction, all those sort of things work well if your deacons serve in this way. Deacons must be allowed to deek, whatever that means. That's the core of their word. They've got to be allowed to serve. They've got to be allowed to do the work that they've been given to do. And so for the last few minutes here, you can see this is an example of a job description that we have. And if you don't have one, it's a good place to give somebody an idea of what it is they're doing, what it is expected of them. Set some expectations of what they're to do in their work. Members. Interesting thing about members, right? How many of y'all would agree with this? 10% of the members of the Lord's church are doing 80% of the work. And so what is everybody else doing? If you're in a workplace and only 10% of your people are working, the rest of them are sitting around, how's your business going? Not very good, is it? So how do you reach those people? Well, it's a good question. And I think whether you're a small church, or whether you're a larger church, or whether you're in between, you've got to have an idea of what it is you're trying to accomplish in the church. Yeah, we kind of generally know what we're doing and what our purposes are. We need to evangelize, and we need to help the needy, and we need to do all these things. But what are we really about? How are we going to go about doing that so that everybody knows the part that they're playing? That's a difficult question. I think it has taken, this is now my 12th year of ministry here at North MacArthur. And I've been here about 18 years. And I've seen this congregation, I've seen the things that are important to them. We're about to unveil a vision for this congregation so that we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. And I think when you have something that is clear on what you're trying to accomplish, people can begin to see how they can play a role in that. If you don't, then 80% of them are just going to sit there and say, check, I came to church Sunday morning, that's good for this week. And they're never going to engage in what they could be doing because nobody's ever challenged them. Nobody's ever given them something and said, this is what we expect of you. How do we begin to do that? Well, I think you do some of that by looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 12. If you remember in verses 12 through 18, Paul is talking and he says, for just as there is one body and it has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free. We were all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. The foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body. That would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body. That would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one of them, as He chose. We naturally tend to become like important figures in our life, don't we? If you find somebody that you respect, you want to spend time with them. You want to learn how they think. You want to learn why they act like they do. This is the part where we've got to begin to infiltrate the congregation. Our tendency is, I know this guy does a good job, and even though he's got 13 tasks that he already does, he'll get it done. I'm going to give it to him. And I think part of that is so it makes us look good. Let's be honest. If I'm going to hand something off to somebody, I want somebody who's going to do it right. That's where that CEO model comes along. But what if there's a guy sitting in the very back, and I don't mean to point at y'all in the back, I'm sorry. But if there's a guy sitting in the very back and you know that he's not involved in something, is that the person that you're naturally going to want to choose? No. Because he's one of those lesser parts of the body. But that's not what Paul says, is it? He says, don't look down on somebody else. That's the person who needs a ministry to be involved in so that they feel connected to the family, so that they feel important to the body. Not the guy who's got 12 tasks, who already has more than he can possibly do, but the person who's not engaged. And as a body, we need to understand it's not about me. It's about the body. It's about the church. It's about the Lord's work. We take a chance on them. Say we ask them to teach a Bible class and they don't show up the first week. Well, I'm done with that. No, encourage them. Help them understand how important it is to be there each week. To be there on time to teach. To be willing to step in for them and not cause them any embarrassment, but take the blame yourself so that as one who is stronger spiritually, you are helping the weaker brother to come along. That's how the body is built up. By getting those people on the fringe and saying, come on, we need you. We need you to function. We need you to be something important in the Lord's work so that we can be the body that we need to be. It's not easy. It is not easy to trust people that break your trust or don't show that they're the sort of person that you typically would want to hand something off to, but you're doing them something good by letting them know that they're not considered a lesser part. We're all working together, and we need you. We need you to help us in this. Now, you're going to have to be patient with them, because chances are you're a lot further in your view of how the work works than they are. So don't stand over here and say, come on, get with it. Go over and walk by them and show them how it works. Show them why it's important. Show them how it will help them to live the full and abundant life that Jesus promised us if they'll walk with you. And I think that is very important. I think that's part of what Paul is trying to teach us here. A couple things real quickly, because I want to make sure you have all your blanks filled in. Some pictures. Look at all those little parts. It takes a lot of parts for just our foot or our hand to function, doesn't it? That's a bunch of things working together to just be able to do that simple function, isn't it? To form a fist, I bet it takes 30 or 40 different parts of the hand working together. And that's true in the body. We've heard some good lessons on that this weekend. But let me give you just a few blanks to fill in. We naturally, like I said, become like people who are important to us. A healthy congregation is made up of those who follow Jesus no matter how we feel about a particular leader. And I say, well, I don't care for him. Your service to Jesus has to come before your feelings for somebody in particular. I wish I had a little more time to say something about that, but we're going to move on. So here's some things that you may do. How to help every member be involved. Take a snapshot of the work that is going on in your congregation. Develop a method. I have an involvement form that can be used to give every single member of the congregation an opportunity to say what they are interested in. And don't just look at that and say, that person's interested in teaching. Okay, put that down. Oh, that person's interested in teaching. Let me go talk to them about that. That person's interested in evangelism. Next time I'm going to go visit or I'm going to have a Bible study with somebody, I'm going to talk to them and see if they want to come in and learn how to do that. Compile these, give them to your deacons so that they have the resources to know who in your congregation is interested in helping with the work that they're done. See, the problem is a lot of times the deacons just go and do the work because they think that's what they've been told by the elders. The elders need to be clear in saying, guess what? We want you to delegate. We're giving you this to lead. It doesn't mean that you go do everything in your area. Train your deacons in their role of the church and follow up with your deacons and encourage them in this role. This is a snapshot of our opportunities for involvement. There's the backside. Why? Because it gives us an indication. This is not the end-all and be-all. This is just, we want you to express what sort of things you would like to do. And then we go and talk to them about those roles. And so we get these sort of things to our deacons so that they know, they have the information, they have access to contact information for people, and we tell them, go and get as many of these people involved in that area. It's passing on of the work. Don't be the bottleneck that stops it. Be the person that helps delegate to the rest of the congregation. You would be surprised how many people are waiting for something meaningful to come their way. In our current culture, people don't come asking. But if you ask them, if you talk to them about it, you'd be surprised how many people will say yes if they're challenged with something to do. Well, that's all I have for you. I hope it's been helpful. We've done it pretty quickly. 45 minutes, I think, is a hard amount of time to talk about getting one of the biggest issues in the brotherhood to work better. But I think if you take some of the things that we've talked about, correct leadership leads to correct function a lot of times. Passing on the work, trusting others to help us with tasks that can help the church. It will bring greater involvement, and we need it. We need more workers in the vineyard, not fewer. So thank you for your time. Appreciate you being here.